figure if I don't put my eyebrows on, I have some good ideas to talk about. But y'all gonna get what you gonna get today. Hello. Hi, y'all. Hello. Hi, Cynthia. Hello. Welcome to another round of a thought that came up during the day, and I was like, you know what, let's talk about it. So it's been a very rough week for me personally. So, the little baggies under the eyes was coming through. Had to go over to the girlies over at Marshall's. And get some of the little iPads, and we put them in the refrigerator. So we're here together. We're in this together. Healing. What Bell Hooks said? She said that healing is seldom done in isolation. It's done in community. So y'all gonna be a part of the process as well today too. But a couple conversations have been coming up around job standards and why you should have some, even if you are career switching. And let's talk about it. So some of the conversations that I've had this week, or actually over the course of the year, has been around the idea that if I am switching careers, I should essentially just take whatever it is that I can get. And if that couldn't be further from the truth, and the reason why so many people are actually miserable, let's say in their careers, or they're afraid of having a time limit on my Instagram, only for me to go on Instagram Live first to tell me that I had spent too much time on Instagram. That's crazy. But what was I just saying? The idea that switching careers and that you should not have job standards, I think, is probably one of the scariest things that anyone can ever advise someone to do, especially if they're just like, hey, you should take whatever you should get. Just get your foot in the door. I promise you, particularly if you're already established in your career or you've been doing a ton of work, you will be miserable in the next chapter of your career. You're going to be miserable, and here's why. If you are unclear as to what type of environment you actually need for you to be successful in over in the next chapter or in the next gig, and you're not able to advocate for yourself on that, you might be potentially setting yourself up to be victim or collateral damage to the cycles that often happen in corporate or happen in organizational structures that are often branded as toxic. Right? It's a toxic work environment. They don't care about people. They don't blah, 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 blah. Oftentimes, these structures are not created with people in mind. They're created with productivity in mind, right? So that's not to say that it shouldn't account for people, but you should account for yourself first. So that means if you've had enough work experience to know that I can't work with these types of managers that are going to micromanage me, be on my back every single chance that they get, or I don't like smaller companies, they just don't have that much structure for me to actually operate well in. Or maybe I don't want to work with a big company because they take too damn long to make decisions, or the actual company culture, there's not much work-life balance, or I think it's a little bit too laissez-faire here, right? These are the things that you need to evaluate. What do I need in order for me to be successful in this next opportunity? And that needs to be your filtering process for what you say yes and no to. And if you can't do that and you're expecting your supervisor or your manager to do that on your behalf, I promise you, you're going to be mad. Big mad too. Because it's actually it's their job to support you and advocate for where they can, but it's not their job to actually manage your career, right? My position came packaged in a Tiffany blue box and was a whole toxic mess. I'm so sorry about that. That being said, here are some of the things that I think I recognize in terms of what job standards can do for you. They can help you stay a little bit firmer on why you are actually job hunting. So let's say, for example, you're job hunting. You're looking for the new opportunity. You are in a position where you know what you want to do. You have an idea of what you want to do, but you're still a little bit apprehensive and you feel like you might go through the interview process and not be able to say yes or no. Job standards are going to help you hold yourself accountable for when it gets emotional. during the interview process, during the job hunting process, when you get discouraged or when you're super excited just because somebody finally texts you back or calls you back, you are going to stand firm to the things that you said that you needed in order for you to actually excel at the next opportunity. The overall idea is, the reason why a lot of us stay in the roles or overstay our welcome in roles is because we like the feeling of being successful in our role, and sometimes we don't want to have to restart that whole process over again to be the new girl or to be the new guy or to feel inadequate or to have to go through the scaling up where you feel dumb or you don't feel like the smartest person in the room. When you build that amount of equity within a team or within yourself, if we're being honest, it's kind of hard to walk away from. It's a little bit hard to walk away from when you are that girl over in the office where people can rely on you. You get the rewards, you get the high fives, you can actually feel like you are rooted in your career. And a lot of us have spent a lot of time feeling like we're not good enough or we're still trying to meet this bar or this expectation over at work for us to finally get there. And it's like, okay, I'm finally comfortable. I have a little bit more currency where I can roll over into, I can come into the office at 12 o'clock, or I can sign on at 1 and be okay, and no one's actually clocking me or checking me because I've actually created impact, I've created results, I've done good work, I have a good reputation internally. Cool. Then you hit the point where your needs change, right? And this is why companies actually do account for people leaving, right? Like the idea of people staying at a company for years on end is actually very dated. So they recognize that needs are going to change, and sometimes the needs are not going to be met over at that company. So now it's on you to identify where can your needs be met and can it happen at this company? If not, then you're likely going to go elsewhere. Now, when you're going elsewhere, you still have to do your own personal due diligence in terms of evaluating what companies are going to make the most sense for you, but you need to know that before you start to hunt. And it'll make that process significantly easier for you to say yes and no to opportunities, especially if you started the hunt and you don't actually you're not clear, but people are throwing you alley-oops and you're kind of taking whatever and you just start interviewing and you start to get frustrated because the opportunities are kind of whack. This is where job standards would make the most sense for you, because knowing that ahead of time, you would have known what to say yes and no to. You would have been clear on the role, on the industries, on the types of problems that you're looking to solve. In addition to that, you'll probably have an idea of, if you get an offer on the table, whether or not, if your existing company counter offers you, if you're going to say yes or no. Oftentimes, that's sometimes the reason why some of us get stuck. And I actually probably will talk about what happens if you get counter offered by your existing company to keep you to stay, what the implications are with that. But just to say, I say all that to say, for career switchers, there is this misconception that because you don't have traditional experience, or if this is your opportunity to get your foot in the door, or you're, not good enough, but they're giving you a shot, you just want an opportunity, that you don't get to command the things that you need in order for you to be actually good at your job. And I think that that's probably going to be the thing that sets you up for feeling like an imposter, especially if you're switching into some of these industries that are a lot more faster paced. Let's say you're going from healthcare to tech. Some of the objections, you've bypassed the objections of the reasons why somebody would tell you no, or they wouldn't hire you, and then you finally get there and you're just so happy to be here that you're no longer advocating for the things that you need for you to be successful. The whole point is for you to say, the whole point is for you is to be productive or to perform, right? Or to produce value of some sort. If you're not able to do that, you have to raise your hand and say, I need these things. It's actually a lot easier to raise your hand when you're not in there. So it doesn't feel like you lied and you're an imposter, because then it becomes the next piece of okay, if I want to ask questions, I don't want to feel dumb, right? And then you don't ask questions, or you don't ask the right questions, or you wait too long to ask the questions, to the point where you're 6 months, 9 months, a year in, and then you still feeling like, I still don't know what I'm doing at my job, right? So I said all that to say, job standards. Some of the things to consider, a lot of people think about what they're not willing to take on from a salary perspective. I think that that's a fair job standard to have, because you do have to survive. You do have to thrive, right? There are other goals that go over into that. So a salary standard for yourself, I think, is actually very, very fair. When people are like, okay, well, if you're switching industries, you have to take a pay cut. Again, I advocate for making strategic switches. So if you new here, go back to the IG lives and other pages. Okay. If you're new here, go back to the other pages. So yes, salaries is a standard that you should enforce. The types of benefits, the work culture, that's something that you should create a standard, at least know ahead of time what makes the most sense for you. What else? The type of working chemistry or working relationship you want with your manager, that's a standard that you should have before you start hunting. The type of company you actually want to work for, whether that is a startup, or that is a small or medium-sized business, or that is an enterprise. Those are some of the things that you should include over in your standards, because it actually implicates how you work and how effective your work is over in that environment. Understanding, what else are other standards? I have a whole full list. Understanding the type of coworkers that you want, or the type of let's talk about people. The type of people that you want to work with. Actually, I think we all know that. I think if you hear, you kind of know that, like, people become more important in your career as you become more tenured, right? People follow people to different companies. That's why you will see ex-Amazoners, ex-Googlers, ex-Morgan Stanleyers going over to this random startup that ain't nobody heard about, but it's a whole lot of gang shit over there for whatever reason, and then it blows up 3-4 years later, right? People in your network, it will help you identify where are the dream teams made, and where are the people that have their own networks that can refer you over into other opportunities later on down the line. That's going to help you identify, like, the type of work ethic that some of these people that actually have very, very strong resumes on, where they get that from. Granted, some of these companies that got great names, it'd be a hot mess once you lift the hood on the car. It'd be a hot mess over there. But it's still something to be said about their relational equity on how they can make introductions over on your behalf. That's super important. There are a lot of senior executives or C-suite executives that will look at the team of people first before they decide to work at that company. You should be evaluating the same things as well too, especially as you're interviewing. Does this person have a strong background, or are they somebody that I would want to work with as well too, or keep in network as well too? That can kind of implicate your decision or help you actually create some standards for yourself. I said something earlier. I gotta write down notes. I'm gonna write down notes in the future, because I just be jumping on here with the vibes. But there was something I was talking about earlier. We talked about people. Oh, this is what we talk about. It's talking about a standard, basically keeping for yourself. Let's say you get a total comp package. You come back to your company and you let them know, hey, I'm about to leave. Another company offered me, and they want to know what the actual they want to know the offer is, so they can see if they can match, right? There's something to consider about adding this over into your job standards of, if your company counters you and you're about to leave, are you willing to stay? You need to know that ahead of time, especially if you've been complaining about this company. You just feel like you've been underappreciated, and then finally you get the leverage of an offer, or somebody over here, somebody else on my body, you know what I mean? And they put an offer in front of you, and now they're finally giving you your just due of what it is that you've been asking for. And so now it becomes a thing of, okay, it'll probably be a little bit more comfortable. Yeah, I'm sure no, never, but some people consider it. It's like, okay, maybe I'll stay. It's a little bit easier. They're giving me the same comp, blah, 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 blah. It's not just a numbers play. I want to consider something else. Let's say you take the counter offer because they finally gave you what it is that you've been asking for. There is going to be a slight undertone that you are the person that was about to leave. And I would be mindful about how you operate at your company, knowing that you will now potentially have that, I don't want to say stigma, because that's a large word, but you may be there is a notion that this person was about to leave. How committed are they really to staying here? Right? Do they really want to be here at this company? Will they leave here again at any other point? You're not just accepting a counter offer if your company finally gives you what it is that you've been asking for, which I think is, I finally got the power. I can say yes, and then I don't have to start over as a new girl anymore. But your brand internally will change if you are in a position where you're interviewing externally, you get an offer, you tell your company that, hey, I'm about to head on out. And they're like, well, wait a minute, where are you going? And then you're like, well, they checking for me over here. And then they're like, okay, let me see what I can do. And then they finally do something. It's all great and dandy until a couple months in. Okay, what are the comments here? Management takes it personally and they won't forget. They will not forget. They will not forget. And then when we think about, yes, you can continue to offer up that value over within the organization, especially if you are a person that holds a lot of the company glue secrets, etc., that's not directly in the systems, because a lot of older organizations, they may not be up to date and having all the information that they need from team to team, or that succession planning or that change management over within the system. So it actually is more beneficial to keep that person is cheaper than to lose somebody that has all the information and a team potentially fall apart. They may just get that information from you, put it in the systems, and when they do a reorg, they'll let you go. If they've been there a long time, this isn't a loyalty issue, you think? I don't know. I'm not necessarily sure how to answer what the question is, but it's not just, I think I just kind of talked about that, right? So it's not just a loyalty issue. But, okay, so think about it. When situations, let me just give you a hypothetical situation. You're at a company, not even at your company. You're running a company, okay? You are in charge. You're running a company. Everything is all great and dandy. You might be, there's more influx, there's more things happening, etc. You have somebody that's a key player, maybe a key player of some sort, or a valuable player, and they're ready to leave. And they can't leave because they know not too much, but they know too much for them to leave right now, right? So it's like, all right, like if they leave, what happens? Does our department fall apart? Is all the information, especially if they've been working there for years, will our department fall apart? Do we have enough information for us to survive without them? Right? Okay. No, we can't survive without them right now. What do we need to do to keep them here? Right? What are they asking for? So then you give them what they're asking for. And then if I were running a company knowing that this person is ready to leave, my next smart plan is to make sure that I understand everything that this person does, get that information out so it's over within a system, and then if push comes to shove and there's a reorg, I'm looking at the people who even wanted to be here anyway, and someone was ready to leave, so why am I going to keep them here? So that's a perspective. That's not don't jump out the window and take that as the only perspective. Use your discernment, but that is something to consider. It's an ego thing. People will say that you don't, How do you determine the work demand or work tempo of a new company before deciding to join? Good question. Ask them about the decision-making process. And here's my thing. I ask a lot of the same questions, and encourage my clients to ask a lot of the same questions to multiple people to see if there is a pattern in the way that people talk about the very thing that we're talking about. If it's consistent, you'll be able to get a sense of like what that tempo is, or at least like what the decision-making process is. For smaller companies, decisions are made faster because they're leaner. It's like a little speedboat, right? For larger companies, we're talking about a carnival ship, right? We're talking about a full ship. So being able to understand from my perspective on and then there also, quick aside before I jump into that, there also are big ships that have little speedboats underneath that actually operate like a startup, like kind of like, let's say a big company just acquires a startup, but that startup gets to operate independent of what the typical company protocol is, right? So they get to make decisions just as fast as a startup would, but they just get the funding, or they get the, the wiggle room of a company that has been around. They get that budget. So you're talking to a recruiter, you're talking to a hiring manager, you're probably talking to a teammate, and you're probably going to talk to a SVP, a VP, CEO, whomever, however that's structured up. CEO, those higher level conversations aren't necessarily, they're not necessarily going to be the people that have those answers. But if you're on more of, but when you're talking to a recruiter, they'll have an idea, but they're really just a broker in terms of people. Like, they're brokering people capital and resources over into their team. The hiring manager and the teammates, or anybody that's related to the team that you would work closely with, you can get an idea of how their processes or how their problem solving or what their existing procedures for certain things run. And when you ask everybody the same question, especially if you're solving the same problem, you want to understand what every shareholder's perspective is on what that process looks like. So if, let's say, for example, let's use a marketing campaign, for example. If I'm saying, I need to see how fast we launch up marketing campaigns internally, right? I'm going to ask the hiring manager about what that process looks like. I'm going to ask the person that's on the team that actually has their hands in it. And if I'm working with somebody that has to, let's say a salesperson, right, that has to actually push it over to their clients because they want to generate more leads, I'm going to ask their perspective on how long it takes to get marketing collateral or marketing information over to them. Can it be faster? Can it be slower, etc.? You'll be able to get a sense of how long that takes and if that fits the type of impact that you're looking to make. I know that there are, I just think a rule of thumb is larger companies generally take longer in terms of like the tempo, for lack of a better reason, in this example. I think larger companies just have more red tape. They have more things to protect. So it's going to take a little bit longer for them to make decisions. I hope that answers your question. I feel like it was, I tried to give you an example of what that would look like, so I'm not being too general, but yeah. Let me scroll up. What's up? Hey. Anyway, y'all, how did we get on here? Oh, we were talking about job standards, and then we wanted someone question. I'm like, what are we talking about? Yes, I did. Thank you. Okay, awesome. So yes, job standards. Recapping what we just talked about, if you're just joining. Make sure you have some standards to protect yourself, y'all. I have been talking to too many people that have lost their confidence and their self-esteem and feel very underaccomplished at work because it's a lawless land essentially over at their companies, and they're ready to go, but there is a fear of leaving their company because they don't either want to walk into another toxic work environment with somebody else, and they don't necessarily know how to set themselves up for success in order for them to take on the next opportunity that would be beneficial for them. So something to consider is creating job standards. What are you willing to, and you're right, like create your job standards when you are in your right mind. What are you willing to say yes to? What are you willing to say no to? From a manager perspective, from a salary perspective, compensation, benefits, the way that show went up over on my IG stories, remote work from home, hybrid, and then also identify and creating standards. Just because standards are meant to be held up, you can still identify if something is more of a need versus a preference. You know what you absolutely need in order for you to be successful, and you can negotiate preferences if you interview well. So want to offer that up to you in understanding, like when you are creating job standards, recognize that there's going to be a difference in being very clear about what it is that you absolutely need, what you would prefer, body your interviews, command what it is that you need and prefer, because now you have negotiation leverage. And that's the one thing that I think a lot of us get a little bit dizzy on, is the negotiation process really starts when you're interviewing, when you actually demonstrate the value of what it is that you're able to do, whether it's in a different environment or not. You need to focus on repeatable success and what you've done in multiple environments. I like to, I've described myself as a business athlete when I was going in from different environments, and they got it immediately. I was a little small forward, you know what I mean? But when I explained it that way, and why it was valuable to different teams, knowing that the need was they needed better communications, that was something that I leaned into. What about interviewing and you've been off for a year? Can you complete the question if you wouldn't mind? I don't know how to answer. I'm not quite sure what the question fully is. And gonna dip in 2 minutos. So you have any thoughts or questions? Jump on in. What about that? I've really been off for a year. I'm gonna see if these actually really work, y'all, because it's a little baggy underneath my eyes. Your girl been up into the middle, into the wee hours of the evening, doing the work, the Lord's work. Let's see what we got. And then, there's always an automation that jumps over into your DMs. Let me know the topics that you'd like to talk more about in the next live. Sometimes I do not have a schedule on here because I am operating on, Eastern Standard Time, even though I'm on the West Coast. Interviewing, and I've been out of work for a year. How does this impact negotiations? The story that you framed the time that you've been off and how you still are able to demonstrate the value with the work that you've done is what's going to impact negotiations. Also, something to consider, we're in a very unique job market where taking time off from work is not the worst thing in the world. It's about the framing, right? Work sabbatical. Like, we have collective trauma now, y'all. We can speak to it. We have collective trauma. We've been through 14 seasons of the pandemic. Tired of it. I want this to shut down. How do you communicate needs around childcare or any similar family priorities without automatically seeing like a liability? This is something that would be talked about during the negotiations per se. But I think that I think that the specifics of that become more relevant after you get the offer. So I think that that's something to consider. So let's say you finally get an offer, you look at the offer, there's certain things that you don't like and that you would prefer on other ends of it. You swap out, command that, but when you actually get the job and these things are in writing already, then you start to set the precedence and the tone of like how it really actually manifests itself. So that's where that communication would happen. But it is a little bit more black and white when you're in the negotiation process. You don't have to go through that many details about who, what, where, and why. This is more so about like your wellness, productivity. You focus on those points when you're negotiating to make sure, because at that point you would have demonstrated all of the value via interviews. Hope that answers your questiones. You gotta freak out it. Okay. Well, I have a little delay here. I'm a jump. Try to keep these tight. 30 minutes. Not trying to give y'all Clubhouse. Y'all been on Clubhouse recently? Y'all still on the app? Is that a pandemic thing? That was a season 1 pandemic thing? All right. Anyway, please vote on my poll and look at the responses too. I would love to see what y'all think about this as it pertains to remote work, as that is obviously a very, very big topic for us entering into season 3 of the Panoramic. And some other things are coming down the pipeline. Applications for the majors are officially closed. We are tapped. We're tapped. And it's going to be a good time. Amen. It's going to be a good time. We're going to see a lot of six figures come through in this next cohort and this existing cohort, if you will. So I'll see you over on the next live. See you tomorrow, y'all. Bye.